Hi everyone and welcome back to another sewing tutorial. My name is Julia and in today's video I would like to show you how to make this classic dress using my new sewing pattern called Scarlett. This dress is designed to be cut on the bias, has a white straps and a rounded neckline at the front and back. It's also designed for woven fabrics, and for my dress I use a Lyocell fabric which is like wonderfully soft, has a nice flow and it's not transparent. This pattern is beginner friendly as it has only front and back pieces and only requires to attach the bias. Of course, the pattern is available on my Etsy shop and I will leave a link in the description below. So now let's jump into the tutorial. The first step is to cut out all your pattern pieces from the main fabric. On the bias you will need one piece of the front panel, one piece of the back panel, one piece of the bias tape for the neckline and two pieces of the bias tape for the armhole. As always, we start by stabilizing the neckline edges. Lay your fabric pieces flat with the wrong side facing up, and before applying the interfacing tape, ensure that the front and back panels of your garment align with the pattern correctly. Is because fabric cut on the bias tends to shift and stretch, so it's crucial to position the tape according to the pattern piece. Now place the diagonal interfacing tape with the fusible side onto the wrong side of the main fabric. Align it with the neckline edges at both the front and back. Ensure that the edges of the interfacing and fabric match up, and to fuse the interfacing use a hot iron with no steam. Apply firm and even pressure, moving the iron gently back and forth until the interfacing firmly attaches to the fabric. Allow it to cool before checking for proper adhesion, and once the interfacing is securely fused, you can trim any excess interfacing that extends beyond the fabric edges. Place the back panel on top of the front panel with the right sides together, align the shoulder and side seam, then pin all edges accordingly, starting with the notches and then pinning the rest of the fabric. Be careful not to stretch the fabric while pinning, ensure it lies flat on the surface to keep it smooth and even before you continue pinning. Sew the shoulder and side seam using a 1 cm seam allowance. After this step, overlock the edges. Now press the shoulder seams toward the back and then do the same for the side seam. Now let's move to prepare the bias tape. So take a piece of bias tape for the neckline and fold it in half with the wrong side facing and then press it flat. Now unfold the bias tape for the neckline and fold each edge towards the center line, pressing them down on each side. Once you press the bias tape for the neckline, repeat the steps for the bias tape on the armhole. At this stage, you should have prepared 3 bias tapes, in total 1 for the neckline and 2 for the armhole. Now unfold the ends of the pressed bias tape for the neckline and armholes, and with the right sides together, align the edges of the bias tape and pin them. Now sew each piece of bias tape together using a 1 cm seam allowance. In this step, press open the seam allowance of the bias tape for the neckline and armholes. Now you fold each edge towards the center line, pressing them down where they naturally creases as we unfolded them in the previous step. In this step, fold the bias tape for the neckline in half so that the seam line is at the halfway point. The center back of the bias tape is marked by the seam line, while the center front is on the opposite side. So mark the center front point on the opposite side. Ensure you have made notches on the center front and center back of the dress. If not, fold the front and back in half to mark the center. Once marked, open one fold of the neckline bias tape and align it with the raw edge of the neckline right sides facing. Match the center back of the bias tape with the center back of the dress and the center front of the bias tape with the center front of the dress. Pin the center points first, afterward continue pinning the bias tape all around the neckline. Remember, the length of the bias tape is designed to match the neckline, so there shouldn't be any excess. Now sew the bias to the neckline by stitching along the crease close to the edge, approximately 5 mm from the raw edge. Turn the bias to the right side and under stitching, catching the seam allowance, stitch 1 mm from the edge of the tape on the right side all around the neckline. Now trim the excess seam allowance on the shoulder seams to reduce bulk when folding the bias tape in the next step. Fold the bias tape where it naturally creases, then fold it in half over the seam allowance and press. Then fold it again towards the wrong side of the garment and press once more. Pin the bias tape in place. Now top stitch the bias tape close to the edge from the inside, approximately 7 mm from the edge. Press the bias tape for a final finish. To attach the bias tape to the armhole, start by opening one fold of the bias tape where the seam line is. Position this open fold along the raw edge of the armhole with the right sides facing each other. Begin by aligning the seam line of the bias tape with the side seam of the dress, then pin the tape around the entire armhole. The length of the bias tape for the armhole is also designed to match the armhole, so there shouldn't be any excess. Now sew the bias tape to the armhole the same way as for the neckline by stitching along the crease close to the edge, approximately 5 mm from the raw edge. Now turn the bias tape to the right side and understitch it, catching the seam allowance. Stitch 1 mm from the edge of the tape on the right side all around the armhole. Now fold the bias tape where it naturally creases, then fold it in half over the seam allowance and press. Fold it again towards the wrong side of the garment and press once more. Pin the bias tape in place. Now top stitch the bias tape close to the edge from the inside, approximately 7 mm from the edge. Press the bias tape for a final finish. Now let's move to the final step, which is hemming. And before the final fitting and hemming, especially for dresses and skirts, let the garment hang for 24 hours. Since the dress was cut on the bias, it has a tendency to stretch. Allowing to hang ensures the fabric settles and stretches naturally. After 24 hours, finish the bottom edge of the skirt with an overlock stitch. Now press the overlocked edge, fold it inward by about 7 mm depending on the width of the overlock, and then press again. Now top stitch approximately 5 mm from the edge, adjusting based on the width of your overlock. Now press again the bottom hem for the final finish. And here's the finished dress. I hope you found this tutorial easy to follow. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more sewing inspirations. Thank you for watching and happy sewing!